Welcome to Wednesday Stash, where I share ways to help you keep your food for longer. New to canning, or maybe you're not new to canning, but is there a chance that you might be using some unsafe canning methods at home? That's what I'm going to go over with you today. There are only two ways to safely can food: boiling water canning and pressure canning. For foods with a pH of 4.6 and below, higher acid and acidified foods such as most fruits, pickles, and fermented food, boiling water canning is the way to go. You don't need to, for foods above 4.6, your meat, your fish, your poultry, vegetables, and tomatoes, or combinations of these foods, pressure canning is required. But you don't need to know the pH of your foods. By following a tested recipe will tell you what you need to do. That's all you need. Go by your tested recipe. Maybe you have heard or if you even practiced some other canning methods. So let's go over what those types are and why they're not recommended. Pressure canners, like the one that I just showed you, pressure canner, like this right here, they're designed to hold at least their minimum size is going to be 4 quarts. That's the smallest size that they're going to, smallest size pressure canner, recommended pressure canner. But pressure cookers are something entirely different. So have a pressure cooker right here. So let's smooth this over a little bit. So this is a pressure cooker, and it's great for cooking food. It has, I'm going to open this up for you. You have your lid that engages. You have your release valve right here, so when you're finished cooking, when you want to cook, you're going to have this engaged so that it would trap the steam, and then when you're finished cooking, you turn that dial and you release the steam. Now, with a pressure cooker might be large enough for your jars, but the pressure cooker, there's no way to know what the pressure in this canner, in this cooker is. So it could be anywhere from 7, 8 to 12 pounds of pressure, or anywhere in between, that it could have that range, which is great for cooking food. Will this cook your food? Yes, it's going to cook your food. You release that pressure, and you're ready to put dinner on the table. But for canning is really important. You need to know exactly what the pressure is, when it's reached that pressure, maintain that pressure for the entire length of time. During the entire processing time, to make sure you're destroying those microbes that cause problems in canning. The main, this is the one that you would use for your low acid foods, and the microbe of concern is going to be Clostridium botulinum, which causes the disease botulism. So you don't want to use something where you don't know whether or not you have achieved that the proper pressure, and if you've maintained that pressure. Because like I said, pressure cookers can go anywhere from 8 to 12 pounds, and then it can vary while it's there. So this is not the type of thing that you want to use. So you cook in the pressure cooker, but you can in the pressure canner, even though you can use your pressure canner to cook your food as well. So know that option is there. It's not limited to just canning food. You can cook your food in there as well. So next thing we're going to look at is electric saucepans. So you might be wondering, people use electric saucepans to can, and I'm looking for my little jar. You might be tempted that you're making something, like with this, you have a jelly jam, you have small jars of food, and you're going to put it in there, and you're going to, try to process for a certain amount of time in this, in a electric skillet. Electric saucepans, again, they won't achieve the needed temperature. Like I said, with the pressure cooker under pressure, it's giving you a particular temperature. With a pressure canners, they're giving you a temperature. If you're at 10 pounds of pressure, that temperature is 240 degrees. So you can tell if your canner is working correctly. You can tell when, after you have vented the canner, so you know when you're to start counting your processing time, when you're to put on, if you're using a weighted canner, when to put on the weight, or if you're using a dial gauge, when you have achieved the proper temperature. Take a look at that. Whether you're using the weight, or if you're using a dial, there's a way that you operate the canner so that you know when the canning has, processing time has started, and then when you're to end the processing time. For this, there aren't going to be any tested recipes for using an electric skillet. As far as your temperature goes, you have no idea what the temperature is going to be. So you don't, not only do you don't know the time, you don't know the temperature, and then as far as destroying the microbes that cause problems in canning, if it be your jams and jellies, you're going for spoilage microorganisms, as opposed to if you're pressure canning, where you're trying to destroy Clostridium botulinum. Knowing all that information, you can't know that with the electric skillet. So this is not an approved device because you just don't know the temperature. You have no idea what that temperature is going to be. There's another method that's not recommended, and that's called open kettle. So your open kettle method is you have jars of food, and when you have your jars, you're going to put hot food into your jars, cap those jars, and then leave them to seal on their own. Sometimes there's some people who they'll fill the jars with the hot jams or jellies, usually, and they'll turn those jars. Again, they'll fill those jars and then turn them upside down and allow them to seal. And once they seal, then they go ahead and put it into storage. Open kettle method is not an appropriate way. That's not a recommended way for canning. Again, you're not going to destroy those microbes that cause problems in canning. So they're going to survive. Your spoilage microorganisms, they need a boiling water canner. You're going to put that food into the jar, and then you're going to put it into the canner, and the water is going to completely encapsulate. It's going to be beneath the jar, the sides of the jar, over the lid of the jar, and you're going to boil for a certain amount of time to destroy spoilage microorganisms. They are not destroyed. Now, will the jar seal? Yeah, they probably will. They're going to seal. But the microorganisms that cause problems, they're still in there, and they're going to cause those problems. So you want to make sure that you follow a tested recipe, which is going to let you know how long that food should be in the jar. Okay? So another way, on the top, microwaving in the canner. So that's your top picture. First, this is dangerous. The metal lids and bands are reactive in the microwave. And again, the needed temperature may not be achieved or maintained for the destruction of Clostridium botulinum spores. Microwaves heat food very unevenly. When canning, it's important to reach the needed temperature and to keep it there for the entire processing time. That's what happens in the case of pressure canning. That's what happens. It's you get to the needed temperature and you hold it there for the entire time. That is not something that you can do in the microwave. And that bottom picture, you're looking at the inside of a dishwasher. That's another method that's not recommended. It's not going to do the job either. Your jars may seal, again, but the needed temperature to control for spoilage microbes, as well as foodborne illness causing microbes, they can't be achieved and maintained in the dishwasher. Next, we're going to come to one of the favorite devices in the kitchen, and let's move this. Actually, we can move this out of the way. Move that over here. This is one of the favorites in the kitchen, and that's that multi-cooker. Extremely useful. It's a device that does a lot, but canning food is not one of them. Again, the temperature can vary. You know, you're cooking under pressure in here. You can slow cook in this. You know, there's so many different things you can do with your multi-cooker. But pressure cooking is one of the things that you can do in here. But you have no idea of the pressure. You don't know how long you're canning for. You can have a timer, but you don't know the pressure, how long that pressure is being maintained, because it can vary. It's not standardized in the canner. When you're using the pressure cooking mode, will it cook food? Yes, it cooks. It cooks food. It does a good job, but it's not designed for canning. So you don't want to use a multi-cooker in order to can your food. And then, let's see if I can show you. Let's see if we can tilt down this last one. Yeah, if you see that right there, the oven. Ovens are not recommended for canning either. Oven canning is dangerous. Not only are canning jars not designed for dry use, these jars are not designed for dry use. They were designed to be to go into water, to process in water. There's a high risk of breakage in the oven. Again, you don't know the temperature. You don't know the temperature when you're canning in the pressure canner or a boiling water canner. The temperature and the time in the tested recipe will be how long the entire contents of the food inside the jar have to reach that temperature, and that's what happens with tested recipes. They know how long, with the food, the consistency, how it was prepared. You put it in the jar. What do you have to do to make sure that every portion of the jar, from the outside all the way to the inner core, they're reaching that temperature? And that's what a tested recipe. That's why they're testing recipes, to find out that information. When you can in the oven, there's no way of knowing if you've ever reached that inner temperature. There aren't any tested recipes using an oven. That's not an approved way to can food. There are only two methods approved to can food, and that's going to be your boiling water canner or your pressure canner. Now, I'd like to point out, you may have, I don't have one of those to show you, but you might have the Ball automatic home cooker for your higher acid and acidified foods, and those are fine to use. That's going to be for jams, jellies, pickles, your acidified foods, things that are appropriate for low acid. For higher acid and acidified foods. If you have one of those devices, yes, can you use it to can your low acid foods? No, you can't use it for your low acid foods. But if you have the Ball automatic cooker for your higher acid and acidified, that's safe to use that. So the things I want to leave with you, when you're canning at home, stick with the tested recipe. If you look at that tested recipe and you go over it, you follow the directions, you will have a food that is safe to eat and will be of higher quality or high quality. It's worth it to follow something. Somebody's done the that type of work in order to give you the information that you need. So that's it for this week's Wednesday Stash, where I share ways to help you keep your food for longer. Next week I'm going to talk about canning mishaps. When things go wrong, what should you do? What do you do if a jar breaks in your while you're processing in your canner? We'll talk about different things that can go wrong during canning. But that's it. Thanks for joining me.